Hey, Nick. Welcome to Frequent Miler on the air.
Hi there, Greg. Great to be here. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. It's been
Not
like
o-
almost 4 days.
right, not often that I see you twice in the same week.
Right, right. We actually presented at the Wharton Business School on Monday, and
Exciting stuff.
we had about 90 minutes scheduled to present. And thanks to a little time mismanagement on my part, you had about 15 minutes, but you did a fantastic job.
Well, thank you. No, it was fun. It was a good time. It's an honor to be invited by a place like that. So, and to be able to have a chance to talk miles and points with some people who are somewhat familiar but very curious, and at a point in their lives where that'll really come in handy to do some travel. So, a lot of fun to be able to talk there, and just like I said, nice to be invited. So great that they found us and reached out to us to ask if we would like to come and talk about miles and points and credit cards with them.
Absolutely, that was great, and so was the FM to go that we did in Philadelphia. That was a lot of fun meeting up with the Philly folks.
Yeah, definitely. Philly's got a great crowd of people. We had a great time talking at the presentation, and a nice time before and after meeting some of the readers and grabbing a bite to eat. So that was great too. I think it really worked out very well, and I'm kind of excited about going back to Philadelphia again at some point in the future.
Me too. Me too. We didn't have any time to do any sightseeing, and it seems like there's a lot. There's a lot there, and a lot of people very knowledgeable and interested in showing us around. And so we should take advantage of that next time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Wish we could have this time. Just one of those things. Sometimes time just doesn't allow as much as you'd like it to. But next time, hopefully, and hopefully, during the summertime, because Philadelphia in February, I'm sure it's wonderful and all for those who live there. I live in upstate New York, so it's even colder here. But February is not my ideal time to go visit Philadelphia. I don't want to run up the steps of the museum, in the middle of the winter. So I want to go in the summertime when I can like walk and hang out and enjoy some sightseeing.
Yeah,
So next
although
time, let's plan that.
it got up to like 50 degrees, which
It
was
did. It did.
great compared to
You're
here.
right. You're right. You're right. That much is true. It was like -4 this morning here. So,
Oh,
and
ouch.
-8 Saturday morning, I
Ouch.
think, when I got up at home. So yeah, it's been chilly. It's warming up. The sun's coming out, so I can't complain now. But I definitely have warmer things on my mind, and so I'd like to be able to put my points to use for that. I'm still working on trying to get that midwinter trip in, and haven't quite been able to plan it yet.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking about a couple things that might help you with that. So the resurgence or revival or reappearance of true fourth night free benefit. We'll talk about that later. And we're also going to cover the Marriott certificates. We brought that up last week, I think it was, and we now have some data to look at and say, are the credit cards any good, given the latest evaluations? But first, a couple of things. One, first, we mentioned FM to go without really explaining what it is, and I think
Good point.
it's worth talking about that briefly. That what Nick and I have been doing is putting it out there to our audience, our readers and viewers and listeners, that if you live somewhere where you'd like us to come visit, get together with some friends and just reach out to us with a proposal. Say, we have 30 people that are excited to see you, and here's what we can do to host you. And we're definitely not looking for money or lodging or really anything but some sort of plan for how we can get together, interact. In the past ones, we've all done presentations, and it just happens almost all of them have been at libraries, because public libraries, usually there are meeting rooms that are for free, and so it makes it a real easy way to have a big enough venue to get 50 or 70 or however many people together to do some presentations, and we do some kind of meal afterwards usually, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, it sure has. And like Greg said, we're not looking for somebody to create a proposal in terms of something they can pay, because we don't need our travel expenses covered or anything like that. We just want to come speak. Really, what it boils down to is we want somebody local on the ground who knows where there's a library with a free meeting room, and can reserve that and take care of the phone calls to make that happen, and figure out a good place to eat that people want to eat at, and kind of connect with the local people. Because
Exactly.
obviously we don't have that local network in each place. So we're just looking for you to get your network together and plan that out, and then we're happy to come and hang out and talk miles and points and meet some folks.
Right, right. So anyway, keep that in mind if you're out there and have a group of people that might be interested. Let us know. So first, this is the point in the show where normally we'd be doing feedback time.
One of my
Your
favorites. Yeah.
favorite segment.
My favorite
Instead,
segment. I love to get reader feedback and hear about what people think about the site and the podcast and everything else. But that's not what we're doing this week, Greg.
that's not what we're doing this week. We're gonna do confession time. I have a confession to make.
Oh,
But
I like confession
first,
time almost as much.
before we get to confession time, I want to recap last week's feedback and where we are with that. So last week we talked about feedback that where we were asked, can we put notes in the podcast and video showing the times that each different segment starts so that people can jump right to the thing they're interested in, as if there are people out there who don't want to listen to all of our babbling.
I don't know who that is.
Right. So, but apparently there are a few.
Okay, all right.
Don't
A few that don't want to listen to all the babbling. Come
right.
on now.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
Isn't that what makes it fun, the babbling?
So we talked about in that episode that, well, we're not getting any revenue from this, so we can't afford to hire someone to do that. And we mentioned, well, maybe we could get Huggies ads.
Right.
So the good news is,
So you got Huggies on the phone this week, huh?
so Huggies gave me a call.
Okay, all right.
And
I'm glad to hear they were listening. They should be.
so Huggies gave me a call, and they said they would pay us if we promised never to mention Huggies again and to delete that part of last week's episode.
and they would pay us enough to hire a free employee. Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
A free intern. They'd sponsor a free intern.
So obviously I said no to that because, given the topics of our normal conversations, Huggies is going to come up. And we can't be all worried about whether or not we're going to talk about Huggies and having to edit the videos because we're not paying this fictional person enough to do things like that.
Exactly.
So instead, we have two things happening. One, on the YouTube videos, someone who goes by Screaming Lincolns has started putting the timestamps as a comment, and I've been pinning those to the top. So
nice.
Yeah, so the last two videos, you can go there, you could see that comment with the timestamps, and you can actually click on the timestamp. It'll jump right to that part of the video. So that's great.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Screaming Lincolns.
Yeah, thank you, Screaming Link. Now the pressure is on, the heat is on to get that on for the podcast now too, right?
It is. So the other development there, we don't know yet if this will work, but someone reached out to us telling us about some software or web app or something that will do this for us basically with an MP3. So you're going to give that a try and we'll see.
Yeah, we're going to give that a shot for tomorrow's. So, well, for today's, the one you're listening to right now.
Right.
Hopefully you saw in the notes that there were timestamps. And even if that doesn't work, then I'm going to commit to putting those timestamps in there for you one way or another. I'll find a way to get that in there.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, if you see the timestamps, then you know it worked, but that's not true.
No, that's not true. Any way you slice it, I'm going to get those time. I know people want the timestamps. I get it. Okay. And people are listening and we appreciate that. We enjoy the fact that people are listening and the people have spoken. So we need to respond to make that happen. So this week's timestamp this week's podcast has the timestamps. You're welcome. Thank you very much for the feedback. And hopefully it's because of that automated program. And if not, then, whatever, we'll invest the time to make it happen.
All right. Good. So it's confession time.
Confession time. Like I said,
yeah,
a close second favorite behind feedback time. Maybe I even enjoy confession time more.
so this is an example. This is something I definitely knew better, and it's probably something normally I wouldn't tell people because I'm a little embarrassed that I did this. But last week we talked about how I had to cancel my Singapore trip.
Right.
And I mentioned that Alaska waived the fees and that I was waiting for Cathay to call and make it. That happened 2 nights ago. I was actually at dinner with John from No Mas Coach, and he was in town. And
very nice.
All of a sudden I see my phone ringing, and I said to him, hold on a second, Cathay Pacific's calling.
Luckily, you're at dinner with the one person who will kind of get that.
So
right?
he was impressed until I told him why they were calling. But so that was actually very easy. I just said, they were trying to reschedule me, but I just said, no, just cancel it all. So that's done. The one part I didn't mention last week is The flight from the U.S. to Asia was actually a Delta flight that I booked with Virgin Atlantic Miles,
Mm.
and so that was to the Seoul Incheon Airport. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had called them about maybe 4 weeks ago to cancel that. I'm not sure how long now ago it was, but anyway, they said they weren't waiving fees. So they only charge $50 per person. They took my credit card number over the phone. And I thought, well, that's not that bad. And I just, so, and the reason I was kind of okay with it was we weren't flying to China or Singapore or Hong Kong, anywhere that the coronavirus had shown up yet. But do you know what I'm going to
But,
say? Well,
but,
I should.
yes,
I
I think
obviously.
I think I
It
do know
was
what you're
dumb
gonna
of me.
say.
Like there's no
Yes.
penalty to wait to cancel
Right.
later, and
Right.
things can always happen. And so I see in the news this morning there's an outbreak in South Korea, which is terrible. But that means that they're gonna waive the fees whether they've done it already or not. So I shouldn't have done that when I did, and it's not a big deal, $100. I actually haven't even seen it hit my credit card, so I don't know if they
Well, that was going to be my next piece. How much were the taxes originally?
the
Was it just the $5.60?
yeah, but they returned that.
Right.
Um,
And they in fact do. They waive
I
they waive
forgot
the
about.
fee.
Yeah, I
Yeah. So
forgot.
you
I
may have
forgot about
read on
that.
this blog called Frequent Miler a couple of months ago. You may have read
I'm
this
about to have
post
another confession.
that I may have emailed you about before I wrote, and told you that when the fees are less than when the original taxes on the award are less than $50, Virgin doesn't charge that $50 change fees or their cancellation fee. Now, I did have an agent that took my credit card number and I paid for it over the phone, and they did in fact charge me. But when I went to cancel another booking later than that, after that maybe we've even talked about on this podcast before, when I went to cancel another one, the agent explained to me that the fee was waived because it was less than the taxes were less than the $50. So in that case, they don't charge the fee. And they did even refund the taxes on that, even though I thought that they would keep the $5.60, but they did give me that back also. Long story short, that agent demanded that I email customer service to ask for the money back that I was charged for the cancellation fees, because I shouldn't have been charged those fees. I was very skeptical as to whether or not the agent was right, but I emailed Virgin Atlantic customer service, and wouldn't you know it, about a month later, I got the $150 back. I had paid $50 per passenger times 3 passengers, and I got that $150 back. So you shouldn't have to pay that fee.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
matter.
It's so funny
Coronavirus
that
or not.
it's so funny that I forgot that. I've been so busy with all the other stuff that I just didn't even have it in my mind. What I forgot was how cheap the fees were. I mean,
Right.
originally,
Right.
and
Right.
so I had in my mind that they were bigger because I had paid more for the Cathay award fees. And
Right.
anyway,
Right.
yeah. So okay, so 2 confessions.
Double confession. Double confession.
Double
But
confession.
the good news is the final outcome should be that it doesn't cost you anything.
That's
So
right. That's right. That's right. So
that's good.
so
That's
all of the cancellations should be free and will be. Even if I got charged, I'll fix that.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a big problem.
Should be fixable. Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Exactly.
cool.
So
Cool.
there's the good news. Hey,
I'm glad I
yay.
confessed. It's
That was a great confession time right there.
feel a little
Okay.
lighter now.
I'll send you the bill for the session later on.
All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'll pay it. I was hoping you would waive those fees, but
Well, I mean, it'll be at least less than the $50 you were willing to pay per passenger.
All right. Might have to find a different confessional in the future.
So this week's confession time out of the way, we got to talk
Yeah.
about the big topic of the week, right?
Yeah.
You wrote a couple of really interesting posts this week about the value of Marriott free night certificates, at least in part inspired by last week's podcast, which we've been finding this to be a recurring theme where each
Yes.
week's podcast kind of inspires a little something for the next week. And sure enough, last week, by arguing that I thought that the 35K certificates were barely, if at all, more valuable than the annual fee on the cards that grant the 35K annual free night certificates at Marriott properties, Greg, of course, went into the tank, did some research to find out why I was wrong.
Right. You were very skeptical when I said,
Skeptical.
"Oh, I think they're still worth about $200," and you were like,
Highly
"Really?"
I was almost exactly in that tone. I have to admit it.
So,
Confession time.
so if that
I admit it's true.
if that's not incentive to write several posts, I don't know what is. So yeah, so I did some what I thought was a unbiased research into how much are they really worth. I picked some different locations to look at awards that were bookable with the certs, and I in each location I sorted by guest rating so that I'd bring the theoretically the best ones available to the top, and then I would go down the list looking for ones that were really bookable with the certificate. So, for example, when I was looking at the value of 35K certificates, I filtered to category 5 hotels, but when what would show up are ones that are both in standard, peak, and off peak. And so any ones that were peak pricing, which is 40K a night, were not bookable with the certificate. So I would ignore those and go and keep going down until I found ones that worked. And then I would record the cash price and the point price, and I was able to then look at, on average, what was the value of the certificate. And I found, whether you use median or mean, the average of the 35K certificates was a little over $200. So, in your face.
I'm only going to half accept that.
Oh, really? Why? Are you skeptical of my results?
Uh, I don't want to classify it that way. I want to say, first of all, I was very surprised, and I have to admit that I appear to be wrong because they appear to be worth $200. And okay, I'll give you that. That was actually some great research, and it was pretty interesting to read and see that that's the way that it turned out. And I'm glad for that. I'm happy for that, for folks who are able to take advantage of it. So that's good. And at the end of the day, I have enough flexibility that I'll probably be able to get reasonable value out of those certificates. But for folks who don't have the kind of flexibility to travel at any time of the year, I still think they're a little difficult to use, despite Greg's good research. However, I also think that it's worth keeping in mind, too, with Marriott, that you also pay those silly destination fees that are going to be on top of that. Obviously, we talked about how when you book an award stay, that kind of cancels out because you don't earn points, but you also don't pay tax. But you have to pay the destination fees with Marriott, which makes that free night feel a little bit less free. So, here you're getting $200 in value, but it costs you $25 to use it. So really more like a net 175 in many places. Of course, that's not everywhere, but
well, but hold on. Don't forget, you'll be paying that resort destination fee anyway. So if
you stay at a Marriott.
Well, I know, but yeah, okay.
And this locks you into having to pay $25 or $30 versus redeeming points somewhere else.
Yes,
it's not really free, right? So it's going to cost you $25. It's like if they charge a $25 phone fee to redeem it, then you can't say it's worth $200. It's really worth $175, right? Only if you're going to book one of those hotels, obviously, and not every place has a destination fee. But when you look at a city like New York, I think your results were skewed because all of those properties, I think, charge $25 or $30 for destination fees.
It could be, although most of the properties that actually showed up were in New Jersey. And I don't know if those have destination fees.
They may not.
Let's
hope not.
Welcome to Newark.
Just kidding, Jersey. Just kidding. I love you too, Jersey. In fact, actually, I was just looking at booking one of those Jersey properties. But at any rate, so I feel like that adds an element of question to it, depending on where you're going to use it, because you're going to get stuck having to use it at a Marriott where you may well get charged those fees. So I feel like that kind of adds to some questionableness of the value, though overall, I will admit to you that it does seem like the 35K certs are more valuable than I thought. However, the 50K certs is where I think things get kind of interesting. So tell us about what you found with the 50K certs.
Okay. So the 50K certs. Yeah. So the 50K certs. So 50K certs can be used to book. The top categories that can be booked with 50K certs are Category 5 peak season, or peak pricing, so 40K properties. Category 6 off-peak, which is 40K, or standard, which is 50K. Or Category 7 off-peak, which is 50K per night. So it can be used to book any of those three categories under the right circumstances. And so I included all three categories in the filter. And then, you know, again, I did the same procedure of just scrolling down the list until I found ones that were 50K or less that were the top rated. And the end result was that the value, the average value was about $300. So whether you looked at, if you looked at mean, it was, I don't, maybe a little bit less than 300, and if you looked at median, it was a little more, or swap it around. I can't remember which was which, but anyway, around $300, which is arguably good enough to make the uh, ultra premium Marriott cards worthwhile, because they also come with $300 in statement credits. So you can argue you get about $600 of travel from the $450 fee on those ultra premium cards. Okay.
Telling that you have to make an argument about it.
Well, so let me say something else about all this, is that research led me to realize a big problem with the methodology I did. And so I continued with it because I wanted it to be apples to apples to what I did with the 35K certificates. But overall, I was really disappointed that the vast majority of the qualifying properties were Category 5, first of all, Category 5 peak. So what I was seeing over and over again was that the properties that I'd really want to stay in were priced out of the range of the certificate. So the best Category 6s were all peak when I wanted them, and so I wouldn't be able to book them with the certificate. So I was very unhappy with that, and that, I think, also was true of my 35K research as well. It's just that for whatever reason, it wasn't as obvious to me what was happening. And so what I really think I should have done is I think I should have put a minimum cap on the user ratings. So, you know, to say anything that is I mean, ideally, I'd like to say anything that's not above a 4.0, I don't count, because that's how how I do it personally. If I look at those at what Marriott chooses to publish as the guest reviews,
right,
and it's not like a 4.5,
which is a great point to make. Yeah, it's what they choose to publish, right?
Right, because if you go to TripAdvisor, it's usually a little bit less, whatever the score is on Marriott, it's a little bit less on TripAdvisor, and so, you know, so I usually at first glance look for 4.5 or better, and so, you know, I would like to do a similar analysis where I restrict to 4.5s. I also, in ideal circumstances, I would have more specific destinations in mind and rule out any properties that are far from that, you know. So because when I did the research, I just said, like, I'm looking through all of Florida and anything in Florida counts, but that's not how real people do this most of the time, except for when you're trying to get out of Michigan or upstate New York in the wintertime. Then you might do that.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you're going to Miami or Tampa or whatever, and so you look there, and if something's far away from there, you're not going to book it. And so future research, I want to do that because I think it's going to look much worse, the results, when I start limiting to those factors.
I think so too, and an interesting piece is, you know, I like. There's a few interesting pieces, but I like that you brought up the rating that Marriott chooses to publish, because it's worth noting for anybody who hasn't actually paid attention to that before. You can't just go on Marriott and leave a review for a hotel. You have to have stayed there, and then not only do you have to have stayed there, you have to fill out the review within like a week afterwards. They send you an email afterwards, and oddly, I don't always get the email, so I can't always review the property. So I don't know if that's random or how that works, but I just noticed that recently because I wanted to leave a positive review for a property like 2 weeks after I had stayed there, and I couldn't find an email from that stay. I found an email from a different stay, but that one wouldn't work anymore, so I couldn't leave a review. So it's also interesting to note that, like, basically it's going to be the people who pounce on the survey afterwards that leave a review, which I would tell you generally means the people who are really happy or really unhappy are most likely to leave reviews. Anybody in the middle, you know, probably isn't going to pounce on it right away if they ever think to go back. I mean, that's typically true of reviews in general, but I think it's even more true there with Marriott, that you can't go back to a property you stayed at, you know, weeks ago and leave a review.
That's interesting. I had no idea that was the case.
I didn't either because I hadn't been leaving reviews on Marriott. And then like I said, I went to specifically because there was a property I've been visiting quite a bit and I wanted to
Mhm.
be able to leave a review. But at any rate, so I think that's an interesting piece of this. I think that one of the things that fatigues me about this is I look at it and say, okay, yes, it's possible to get a room that may have cost you $200 for the 35K certificates or $300 for the 50K certificates. But here's the thing. First, you brought up a great point in that it might not actually be the place you want to stay
Right.
because the reviews may not be top reviews. And then it may also not be the category that you were hoping for. You know, if you're using your 50K certificate on a 35K property kind of a thing that happens to be at peak pricing at 40K, I think mentally it feels like it loses some of the value. You're like, oh, I'm staying at a lesser property than I
That,
could potentially
yeah,
stay at.
that's
It
exactly
kind of
where I'm at
that
with.
devalues it.
That's exactly where I'm at with this. Is that, first of all, when the merger first happened, the Category 6 hotels, so the 50K hotels, were some of the best Marriotts around because the old Category 9 was their top category for Marriott itself, not for Ritz and some other things, but for Marriott, and that translated, if I remember right, to the new Category 6. Like those that were in Category 9
Yeah,
were
exactly.
pushed, and so at that time, the Bonvoy card, the Bonvoy Brilliant card, and the Ritz card that offered the 50K certificates, those look pretty amazing. It's like, wow, we could pay the annual fee, get $300 in credits for other stuff, and then get a free night at one of these top properties, which was fantastic. Then there's been several category adjustments since then, and then this new one, which is devastating, to where all the good properties have been moving up, and the introduction of the peak and off-peak pricing has been brutal. So, when I remember when I first wrote about the category certificates, saying we'll have to wait and see what happens with when peak pricing is introduced, how whether we're able to actually find properties in standard when we want them. And I think probably at the time, well, I was just giving Marriott the benefit of the doubt, like maybe we would, but you know, my experience here, I didn't pick particularly high traffic times to look, except
Right.
maybe July 4th, but that wasn't even that high traffic for some of the places I was looking at.
Yeah.
It's just some places like, in Florida and California particularly, everything seems to be peak all the time or almost all the time. And so, yeah, I think that we have to be thinking about the 50K certificates as like, yay, we can use it at a Category 5 property anytime we want. And that wouldn't have even been that bad of a statement a year and a half ago before they started doing category adjustments, but now it's kind of depressing to think of that.
Well, it is because a lot of those category 5 properties are like your Residence Inn and Courtyard and Spring Hill type properties that just happen to
Yeah,
be in high demand places. And
right.
so it just doesn't feel exciting to pay a $450 annual fee to stay at a Spring Hill Suites. I mean, I like Spring Hill Suites and all. It's great for what it is. When I want a cheap night on a road trip or that sort of thing, especially traveling with a family, it's great. But I don't want to have an ultra premium credit card with a $450 annual fee or more if it eventually increases. To stay at a property like that with the certificate. So I feel like it feels like it loses a lot of value, even if it mathematically retains its value. It doesn't kind of emotionally retain the value, the excitement that it brought in the beginning.
Yeah.
And also, then along with that, though, I think it's kind of interesting to look at this certificate a little bit differently then. And so I have a few different thoughts on it. First, I want to note that I think it's interesting that the 35K certs you found were worth about 200 bucks and the 50K certs, which are about 50% more valuable theoretically, right? 50% of 35K would be 17.5. So you add that on, it's 52.5, right? Sure
Look at him
enough,
do the
300
math. Wow.
bucks. 300 bucks,
Yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
50% more valuable.
Hey,
So
yeah.
it's interesting that those are fairly consistent in
Right,
terms of the
right.
value they get, which kind of goes to show you how Marriott is keeping that their categories more closely tied to cash prices than perhaps in the past. So it's
Yeah.
becoming more and more revenue focused, I think, more and more like a Hilton sort of a model, even though they still retain categories. They're obviously recategorizing to try to find kind of group those hotels together. So I think that's an interesting takeaway from your research, that
Mm.
it did come out more or less exactly how I might have predicted if I were using the $200 number anyway for the 35K cert. So obviously, there's a pretty standard value there, and I'll come back to that later when we do this week's question. But at any rate, so I think that's interesting. I think that if you want to still convince yourself that these cards are worth it, the way
Mm.
to convince yourself is to say, okay, well, the nice thing is I can go to a really mediocre property during a period of high demand.
Right.
And so if you if you want to go, you want to go be there at the Super Bowl, or you want to go, like last year I used my 50K cert in Milan during Fashion Week when almost everything was totally sold out, and the rates at the Westin Milan Palace or whatever it was were like $900 a night, and I was able to use a 50K cert. Now it's not a $900 room; it was basically a regular Westin hotel room, a little bit fancier than normal because I happen to think that property is pretty. But at the end of the day, not a $900 room, but it
Sure.
definitely saved my butt in that situation because
Yeah.
I had a flight, I had to stay in Milan, and I didn't realize I had booked it during Fashion Week. So it was very helpful to have. So I think that these certificates are that kind of get out of jail free card. When hotel rates are way beyond what's reasonable, you kind of have a get out of jail free card, as long as you're willing to sacrifice and say, okay, I'll use it at a lesser category property when room rates are really high. Of course, then you look at it and say, well, but I could have manufactured those points or used points instead. And so then it still kind of stings a little bit in terms of
Yeah. It it
dropping the
it
value.
does. It does. It goes from, so the 50K certs were, initially easily usable in an aspirational property that you're excited about staying at, and now, yeah, you can save real money by using it, absolutely, but it's just not exciting. And so,
Well,
and don't get me wrong, there are properties that are exciting. It's
of
just
course,
that the
aren't.
majority that you're going to come across are not. That's
You
where
have
we're
to
at.
plan a trip around getting to one of those awesome
Or
properties
just get
with,
really lucky. Yeah.
or get lucky, yeah, that it
Yeah.
happens to fit into your plans. I also think that it's there's an argument to be made that those certificates are less valuable than the numbers if you're somebody who does any kind of manufactured spending, because we've talked about how the Marriott cards are not the ideal ones to be doing any kind of manufactured spending on. But let's say that you have one of the Chase Marriott cards, and so you're going to go to Simon Mall with it and buy Visa gift cards. So
Mm-hmm.
in order to manufacture enough points for a 50K night, you'd have to do $25,000 worth of spend, because those cards give you 2 points per dollar.
Okay.
So 25,000 Simon gift cards
Mm-hmm.
cost you $4 a piece to activate. So you're talking about $100 in activation fees. And then your liquidation cost probably varies depending on your methods, somewhere between 25 and $50 to liquidate. So you're
Okay.
talking about around $125 to $150 to MS 50,000 points.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and 50,000 points are much more flexible than a free night certificate that
Right.
lasts for 1 year.
Right. I'd
So
value 50,000 points a lot more than a
a lot
50K
more than a
certificate.
50K certificate. So
Yeah.
when I look at it and I say, well, I could manufacture the points to achieve the same end goal for 125 to
Mm,
$150. I have a hard time valuing that certificate at $300. Even if it'll get me a
yeah.
$300 hotel room, I have a
Right.
hard time valuing it
Right.
that high.
Well, it's interesting because if you remember when we talk about the value of things, there's two important components. There's how much travel value can you get from this thing, but then there's another side, which is how much would you be willing to pay for this thing? And I think I think of those as two separate things. So I
It's
agree
true.
with you 100%. Well, not only is there no way I would pay $300 for one of these certificates, but anybody would be foolish to, because if you're expecting to get $300 of value from it, why would you lock in $300 of cash in exchange for something that may or may not give you $300 of value? There's literally
So,
no point in that.
so then how much for a 50K certificate? How much would you pay for one if you had the ability to buy a 50K certificate, just one of them or two of them? How much would
Wow.
you pay per certificate?
Yeah, yeah. That's what we should be asking. And I don't have
It
an
is.
answer like right off the top of my head. Um, would I pay 150? I guess is the question. I mean, that's probably the most I would pay. But I have to
So
think about that some more if I'd even do that, because, you know,
So can you see where I'm going with this? You're going to say I'm going to
Yeah,
have to, and you're totally right
yeah,
that you'd have to think about whether or not it's worth paying
sure,
150 for a
sure,
50K cert. So a
right,
35K cert
yeah.
that's significantly less, you would have to pay significantly less than $150, right? So the 125 for the Marriott business card for a 35K cert seems totally unreasonable. And at $95 for the other cards that come with a
Mm.
35K cert, boy, that starts to seem kind of unreasonable too, pretty quickly, doesn't it?
So paying $95 for a good chance of getting $200 value. So you're asking, should I, could I pay $95 for a 35K cert?
I mean, that is what
You
you're
know,
essentially
you're,
paying.
you're
And
right. You're right. If the traveling salesman came to the door, that that guy with the
knock,
DoorDash
knock, Greg.
subscriptions,
Knock, knock.
he's also got in his other
Comes right back to bite you,
pocket.
doesn't it?
He's got his Marriott certs in the other pocket, and so he's asking me. He says, "Hey, I've got these certificates that are good for any Marriott hotel worldwide that costs 35K points or less, and it's good for a whole year.
A whole
And
year.
if you call, you could even get it extended for a year."
Mm-hmm.
Then he says, only $95. Am I going to do it? No, I wouldn't do it. I mean, again, unless I was like getting ready to reserve a Marriott, and I looked at it, I'm like, ooh, wow, I'm gonna save, 35, or let's say I'm getting ready to book a 2-night stay at a category 5 or even a category 4. Either one, it might pay to buy those certificates and instead of paying out all those points, right? I think if you did the math, you'd say, yeah, that's a
Right.
good deal for those points, for
Right.
keeping those points. So,
That's tough.
so
That's an interesting point.
yeah, so that sort of backs me into the idea that, like, if you know you're going to use them without problem, then it probably is still a good deal, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, I can't argue with that. If you're very confident that you're going to use them and get $200 in value, you have a reasonable idea of where you'll go or about where you'll go to get that much value out of them. Then, yeah, I guess they're worth it. I suppose so. I just think it's interesting when you look at it,
Yeah,
particularly through the lens of the 50K certs, because, like you said, would you pay? You probably wouldn't pay any more than 150 for a 50K cert. Probably, I don't
right.
think anyway, unless you knew you had a near-term use for it. You probably wouldn't just speculatively to have one to use sometime in the next year pay $200 or $250. So at max, I think you got to value the 50K cert at 150. So then, whether or not you choose to value the 35K cert any more than $100, I feel like is a questionable decision. And if it's going to save
Yeah,
you real money, like Greg said, hey, by all means, of course, why would you pay 200 if you can pay 95? So
right,
if
right.
you know it's going to save you real money, of course, do it. Keep the card, pay it every year if you know you're going to save the money. But I feel like it's if you're not positive, then it becomes a very difficult value to
Right,
support.
right. So let me first say that having one Marriott card for anyone who seeks status with Marriott, it's essential to have one because you get the 15 nights
True,
automatically
true,
each year. I think
true.
that's then a
It's
no-brainer
worth value.
to
Yeah,
to keep at least one. And if you have the Ritz as your one and you value the Priority Pass membership deal and the ability to add free authorized users and the great uh, insurance, the great travel protections it has, then I think too there it makes sense to say, okay, the certificate and the $300 in airline fee incidentals are compensation, to make it less painful to pay the 450, but to get all these things I want. I think that's still right, a legitimately good deal.
yeah,
Um, so,
I can
but
agree
so
with
given
that.
all that, so are you going to cancel all your Marriott cards besides your Ritz card, or including your Ritz card?
And I don't think I'm going to get rid of the Ritz card because it's such an easy value for me. I spend
Yeah,
$300 a year on things that legitimately qualify for the $300 credit normally. So that's typically just cash back that I was going to pay out one way or another. And so and in my case, I'm still getting charged the old grandfathered $395 annual fee on my Ritz card.
oh
So
yeah,
I'm not
that's a
gonna
great deal.
decently low net cost, especially when you consider, like you said, all of the ancillary protections that come along with the card too, travel protections and whatnot. I'll put award taxes and fees on that card when I'm
Mhm.
traveling by myself. So there are other reasons why I keep it in the unlimited priority pass guest. So for me, it's worth it. So I'll keep that one for sure. The others, though, it's getting questionable. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
one thing that I think is probably worth noting, where if you know you're going to get value out of the certs eventually, Greg brought up a good point earlier in that Marriott has been very good about extending certificates by an additional year. Stephen Pepper wrote a post this week, or we published a post this week about extending his. And I did the same back in January, waited until the day before a certificate was set to expire, called in to see if they would extend it, and they did. And of course, the next year's certificate posted just a few days later, or maybe a few days before that even. And so now I have 2 of those 35K certificates that I could use for a weekend away. So, by waiting, you perhaps give yourself a chance to make it more useful, maybe, possibly. Though, again, if you're not sure you're going to get much more than $200 in value, then you got to really start thinking about the time cost, because I spent $95 on that now well over a year ago in the hopes that someday here I'm maybe going to be able to use them.
Right.
And
Right.
so, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't really defend that very, very
No.
well. So I'm definitely leaning in the direction of canceling them, especially if I'm
Mm.
able to generate Marriott points. I've been doing some MSing on the Ritz
Mm.
card, because I've been finding some decent values for the points. The certificates, though, I feel like are almost more disappointing because of the way that
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
always use them where you want. And I know people would love to be able to add points to them, to be able to use it at a peak time or mix it together with points and that kind of thing. And I mean, I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see Marriott implement that. I doubt they ever will. I mean, these things are designed so that some people will not use them, or people will use them for less than ideal value. Uh, I would like to see them return to the days of them being category based, and so be able to be used at peak or off peak up to that category. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I think that adding points to make up the difference is not going to happen. That's
Right.
going to require too much of a technology solution that isn't worth the
I,
investment
I
for
agree
something.
that it's very unlikely. It would be an awesome change that would make their certs more
Much.
valuable, I'd argue, than any other hotel certs that are out there. But yeah, there's no way they're going to do it. And sad thing is, there seems to me there's a good chance the reason that they went to the point-based approach in the first place was that so that people wouldn't cry about when their old, how they used to get category 5 certificates, and now with that same credit card, that's the old credit card, now it's what is called category 4. And just because they changed the names of the categories. And so I think they avoided the kind of controversy that would cause by saying, before it was worth 25K, in the future it's worth 25K. And so they said, let's just, I don't know, that's my guess anyway, that they're avoiding it.
That might be part of the reason.
I don't know if that's the reason, but it's really unfortunate. And it's weird that they did it with the credit card certificates and not the travel package certificates. So they're still category based.
So obviously they have an ability to make it category based.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that is a reasonable thing to hope for, to ask for, to hope that Marriott will be willing to change someday, perhaps, because they do those category based. It's also interesting to me. I don't know, surprising would be the right word, but interesting to me that when you reach titanium status, one of the choice benefits is a 40K certificate, and the credit cards offer a 35K certificate. So the titanium certificate is arguably then much more valuable than the credit card certificate, since it can be used.
Exactly. Yeah, that became really clear to me when I was doing my research, and I thought about doing a whole post on that. Although I don't know how many people, how big of an audience there is for that little nugget of information. But since the majority of my 50K certificate uses in my experiment were for 40K properties, the 40K certificate is worth almost as much as a 50K certificate.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then all of the failed, all the ones I couldn't include in my 35K research, would have worked. Every single one of them would have worked with a 40K certificate. So it's a shame that the only way to get a 40K is with the getting titanium status.
But I got to say, I'm glad though that you talked me into taking the 40K cert last year. I don't even know
Mm,
that you intentionally tried to, but
yeah,
I was asking about what to do at the end of the year,
right.
trying to figure out whether or not to spend an extra 15,000 points to pick up the Knights to hit titanium status. And you were like, oh, well, essentially you're trading 15,000 points for a 40K certificate. That sounds like it makes sense because in my situation, that's what I had to do
Right,
to
right.
do
I
the rest
remember
of the
that now.
Knights.
Yep, yep.
Right. And I'm glad that you did that because if you
Hmm.
hadn't, and I still had hit 75 Knights,
Right.
I probably would have taken the suite upgrades,
Yeah,
and I already had 5 suite upgrades from the 50 night choice benefit. I'm glad that I took the 40K cert at 75K choice benefit because, or 75 night choice benefit rather. I'm glad I took the 40K cert because those are much easier to use. I've been
yeah.
looking at New York City a bunch lately, and I'm looking during an off peak time actually. But when I look at peak times, and I've looked at some summertime dates and things, there's just so many things that are 40K. Uh, whether that's peak or off
Yeah.
peak, so many that are
Yeah.
40K that I feel like that's much easier
Good.
to use.
Good, good, good. Yeah, so I picked the suite upgrades with I really didn't want to. I really didn't want to. I thought, the 5 from 50 nights would be plenty, but I still have the 7 night stay certificate
Mm,
from my travel package that I really want to use somewhere good, and I want to apply suite upgrades to that stay. And you can't, if you only have 5 suite upgrades and you have 7 night stay, you can't use it at all. And so I would, if I only had 5 suite upgrade nights, I'd either have to book only 5 nights with my package, or just not apply suite upgrades. So that's why I did it, and I never felt good about doing it, but that's where I'm at this year.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes much more sense. Yeah. Here's a question that maybe there is no answer to. Is there
Mm,
any way to know which rooms are eligible for suite upgrade certificates before you make a booking without making a booking? I've been running into that where I've been
I
looking
don't
at
think so.
properties and kind of curious as to which potential suites I could use my suite upgrade award for because it seems to vary a little bit in
Hmm.
terms of which suites are available for those suite upgrades.
Right.
And just yesterday, in fact, I made reservations at 2 different places to see, and one of them, none of their suites were eligible for
Ah,
for using the suite upgrade awards, and the other
that's
one
weird.
it showed me which ones. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I
Huh.
just wondered if there was an easier way that I was missing. So that might be
No.
an interesting
Then there's other
thing to explore.
restrictions like Ritz. I don't think you could apply them, and there might be
Right.
some other properties where you can't. I can't remember.
Yeah. 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 Well,
So
all right. So I have 5 of those and you have 10. But if you're looking to stay in a suite, then this week we uncovered a way that you may be able to do it without needing any suite upgrade awards.
yeah, this is very interesting. A reader asked us about this. The reader saw a fourth night free benefit when logging into their Sapphire Reserve account, and then you dug into it. And why don't you give us an overview? What's there?
Well, so this launched almost a year ago, and somehow it must have flown under the radar because I didn't even realize it, or if I saw it, I must have assumed that it was something that was short term or not very good. But I dug into it a little bit because Chase announced a partnership again almost a year ago with SBE Hotels, which is a hotel group that has a bunch of Accor hotels under different brands like the SLS and Delano and a number of different brands that you may be familiar with if you know your a core live limit or live limitless sort of properties. And so the benefit is again just a select set of properties in different cities, some international, mostly domestic. And the benefit works this way. So you book through their link and it takes you directly to the hotel website with a promo loaded, that when you pay with your Chase Sapphire Reserve card, you got to reserve and pay with the Sapphire Reserve card, you get a fourth night free, you get a $30 property credit towards food and beverage, free breakfast for 2 each day, and then hopefully a 1 category room upgrade. That's one of those things that's based on availability and late checkout based on availability. So the concrete benefits are a fourth night free on those bookings that you make through that link, and then the $30 property credit and breakfast for 2 each day, continental breakfast for 2 each day. So I dug into that a little bit because I was curious as to how useful that would be. And the fact of the matter is, it was fairly confusing because not all properties displayed information the same way. There were some exceptions and blah, blah, blah. And if you're interested in knowing more about those, I guess we can get more into those, or you can check out the post for the different problems that I found with the benefit. However, the takeaway that I thought was particularly interesting, that was a little farther down in the post for those who are going to read that far and get the nugget out of there, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is that this fourth night free, first of all, applies to any room type. So it even applied to penthouse suites. I looked up a property in the UK where the penthouse suite was like $1,500, $2,000 a night, and and the fourth night free, sure enough, applied to that room as well as it would to a standard room.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, it's a true fourth night free. Now, you may remember the City Prestige card offers a fourth night free. And years ago, it used to be the fourth night that was free, but then they
Right.
switched at
Right.
some point to 25% of the room rate, the average nightly rate you get back. So what that means is if your fourth night is a very expensive night, you're not going to get that full fourth night back. You're going to rather get the average nightly rate over 4 nights with the Sapphire, or excuse me, with the City Prestige fourth night free benefit. However, with this Chase Sapphire benefit, you get the actual fourth night for free. So if that fourth night is an exorbitantly expensive night, you could potentially save a lot of money. Like, for example, but
Yeah. I mean, a ton of money. And in fact, if you earn points, like Acor points or whatever kind of points that a hotel offers, you hopefully you'll earn. Well, will you? Maybe you
I
won't.
don't think you
So
will.
that was one of the cool things. The way the City Prestige benefit worked back when was that you could book the 4 nights leading up to New Year's Eve, for example, in New York City, or 4 nights leading up to any like major big event where prices suddenly skyrocket on that fourth night, and you used to get rebated that last night. So the hotel would see the full charge and you get points based on that full charge. And so can you imagine, like, I know people who did this where they would stay at maybe a Hilton in New York City where first 3 nights were around 200, the last night was like 2000,
Hmm.
and then they're getting uh,
A pile of
15x Hilton points plus whatever kind of promotions were going on at the time and things like that. So it was an incredible deal, which is also probably why they stopped doing that.
probably, probably why they stopped doing it.
So
Yes,
it sounds like we don't have a way to game this really. Like, so you could
not
get,
from that standpoint.
if you really need that night. I mean, it's amazing to be able to get that night for free, right? But you wouldn't go
Right.
stay somewhere just because it's higher on that night, I'm thinking.
No, because this does not work like a rebate. That it actually comes off the bill at checkout, and
Yeah.
that's one of the areas of confusion. Some hotels display the total for all 4 nights, and they say that at checkout the fourth night will be taken off. And other hotels show that that fourth night is $0 when you do the search. And so I used New Year's Eve as an example in one of the searches and showed a property in New York
Mm.
City where New Year's Eve was much more expensive than the other 3 nights. But New Year's Eve was $0 when it was the fourth night. I did the same with the penthouse suite. Penthouse suite was around 1,000 British pounds the other nights of the week. Saturday night by itself, it would have been almost 1,500 British pounds. So I think
Mm.
that's more than $2,000. But that would
Yeah.
have been free under the example that I gave for that one. So if you're somebody who likes to travel for special events and you want to be there for the World Cup game or the Super Bowl or the New Year's Eve or whatever it might be like that, when that one night is really expensive because of an event, then you could potentially plan that out for that to be your fourth night and get that night for free and save a bundle of money anyway. You're not going to game it for a bunch of points, but a nice savings. And also, if you're the type of person who likes to book those upgraded rooms, then obviously you get that benefit. And one of the things I like about this over the City Prestige is that today, if you have the City Prestige card and you want to make a fourth night free booking, you have to do that through thankyou.com, which means that in the vast majority of cases anyway, you're not going to earn any elite credit, not going to earn any hotel points. Whereas these bookings through Chase and SBE are done directly through the hotel website. So you at least theoretically will be able to earn points in that program, which we determine those points are not an amazing value, right? In your guide, about how much is the rebate worth? Did you figure? Do you remember?
Well, so they don't. The problem with Accor is the points are very valuable. They transfer 1-to-1 to certain airline programs, and they're worth 2 cents each or 2 euro cents each towards a hotel stay. So that's way better than most hotel chains, but the earnings are way less. So I think the net value of staying at an Accor versus a Hilton or Marriott is actually less because of the rebate. You know, if you turn it into sort of like, if you think of it as like a percentage, how much value am I getting from this? I think you're actually getting less because the others are often, let's say the Accor points are on average worth double. The other hotel chains are offering 3 times as many points. It's somewhere in that
Well,
range.
right, but let me pull you out of the weeds. If you're booking
Okay.
with the City Prestige card, you don't get anything, so you're
Oh,
getting something
absolutely.
versus
No, no,
zero.
no. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd be very happy to earn Acor points, and
Right.
so that would be great.
And that's the thing here. You will
Yeah,
still be eligible to earn points when you make these fourth night free bookings. So
right.
if you're an Acor person, then great, you can get yourself some points out of this, whatever those point earnings are, probably. And I say probably because one of the properties I looked up for an example,
Hmm.
luckily I looked on the hotel website and I saw during the booking process that it mentioned that it's a non-participating Accor property where you can't earn points.
Right, right,
even
right.
though even though I was on the Accor Live Limitless website, it was telling me, oh, this is a non-participating property. They just like to be listed on our website but not participate in our program apparently. So I don't know that you'll earn points at all hotels or even the majority because I didn't check every single one separately on the Accor site to see.
Yeah,
Also, it's worth noting, if you haven't read the post yet, that while the vast majority of these properties do offer that continental breakfast for two that I mentioned earlier, it does say in the terms that if the property doesn't have continental breakfast, that instead they can substitute that with 2 free drinks at the bar. And I don't think that that is a very comparable substitution at all. Luckily, there's only 2 properties that seems to apply to so far, but the only way to know which 2 properties is to go to the terms and conditions page and read the very last bullet point all the way down at the bottom. You don't see it during the booking process when you're booking those properties, and I find that a little bit problematic. But as long as you can deal with those oddities, then if you're the type of person to travel during special events or the type of person to pay for an upgraded room, this could certainly save you a bundle of cash.
yeah. So what about the one in Vegas that you highlighted? That's part of the M Life program, right?
It
Which is
is,
which
yeah,
is partners with Hyatt, right?
it is.
So
So,
can you
yeah,
earn Hyatt Elite Nights from this? So is this
I
a
believe,
way to basically
yeah.
get 4 Hyatt nights for the price of 3 in Vegas?
Potentially, yes, it definitely should because you're
Mm,
booking directly through the Delano website. So it's a link you click through Chase, their partnership with SBE that pre-fills whatever the promo is. I tried to figure out a promo code that you could put in for your own searches. I couldn't, so I had to go through the booking site. But that booking site is essentially working like some sort of a portal and bringing you directly to the Delano site. So yeah, I would expect that you're going to be logging in during the process and booking. And in my case, I have my M Life account linked with my Hyatt account. So I automatically get Hyatt points and Hyatt stay credit when I stay there. And I've stayed at Delano a number of times and booked directly through Delano and had no problem getting the credit. So, yes, I believe it should work that way that you will get Hyatt credit.
I feel a
I
butt
think that's,
coming.
well, I think it's interesting because I didn't know that property was in a core at all. So I don't know how that works because can you earn points in both programs at the same
Right? I don't
time?
know.
I,
I
I don't know about that.
doubt it.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I only kind of doubt it. I like only partially because, well, let me say this, that
Mm,
those who've stayed at MGM properties know that you can double dip and earn Hyatt points and stay credit and also earn Southwest points for your stay. So you can link both of those to your M Life
I
profile. You got
didn't
to
know
do
that.
it. You got to do that at the desk.
Mm.
You only earn, I think it's 600 Southwest points per stay. But of
Hmm.
course, I've done a bunch of hotel hopping in Vegas before where I've stayed at 3 or 4 properties in 3 or 4 nights and picked up
So it's
Southwest points.
600 per day or per
No, sorry,
stay.
per stay.
Per
Per stay, yeah.
stay. But if is there are there multiple properties so you can bounce back and forth between them so have different
Yeah.
stays?
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
but then you
MGM's
can
got
do the
tons
fourth
of
night.
them. You couldn't do this fourth night free,
How
exactly. So you wouldn't be able to stack
so
this and
getting
that.
completely off topic here, but how many nights if you did one night stays only? How many
Hmm.
nights would you have to stay to earn a companion pass?
I mean, it's 600 points a night. I mean, 10, 6,
See what
100, a
Nick can
couple
do.
thousand, a couple hundred, 200 and a few,
200 and a few nights. So
right?
so
Something
you
like that.
can you can
You can earn it
you could live in
without, right?
Vegas as long as you change hotels every single night And the benefit would be you'll get enough points to get companion take. Wait, are these points
Companion pass eligible.
pass
I'll
eligible? I
have to
don't
go
know.
back and check. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and check and
All
see.
right. If anyone's listening and thinking, "Ooh, that's a good idea," change your mind. It's not.
I mean, you can bounce between Excalibur and Luxor really cheap. Anyway. So the other thing to note though about the fourth night free, you asked about, is this a good way to pick up cheap Hyatt nights? The other thing to keep in mind though is that if you have Hyatt Explorer status or better, and you've matched that over to Hyatt M Life, then you have M Life Gold, and so the rates that you see in your M Life Gold account may be better. You may have a better deal. I've had times where I've had a couple of free nights at Delano or at Mandalay Bay, and they were able to move my reservation from Mandalay Bay to Delano anyway. So at the desk when I arrived there. So you may have a better deal. I just looked in my account in order to compare for this, and it would have been $50 or $60 cheaper to book directly through Delano through my M Life offer than the fourth night free booking. However, if I had booked directly through Hyatt on my own, or I'm sorry, through M Life on my own, I wouldn't have gotten breakfast for two each day and the $30 credit.
Yeah,
so
good point. Right.
So that certainly may balance out. $60, to pay $60 more and get free breakfast for two each day for a four nights.
Yeah,
for 4 nights. I mean, that's probably worthwhile.
Sure.
eaten at Della's Kitchen there. It's pretty good, and the credit that they give you for breakfast covers it. And if it works the same way as it has worked in the past, I believe you'd also be able to get room service breakfast alternatively, rather than eating at Della's Kitchen. I didn't put that in the post because I don't know if it's still the way it was today that it was before, but in the past you've been able to take that as room service breakfast instead.
Yeah. All right. So that's cool. So the talking about fourth night free actually reminded me of something when we were talking about the Marriott certs before that I meant to bring up, which is fifth night free. That one of the other reasons that certs are not as valuable as they appear is if you intend to use them on fifth night, on 5 night stays along with points for some of the nights, you if they're not as valuable because you don't get the fifth night free. You have to have the whole thing, at least 5 nights paid for with points in order to get that fifth night, really the cheapest point night free. And so if you pick just one certificate of your 5 night stay to use, you don't get anything free. So you literally get zero value from that certificate if you do that.
Right. That's a great point. And I don't know if maybe it was in part motivated by the fact that I had a reader emailing me with exactly that type of scenario earlier this week, where they had one of those stays booked and they were looking to replace one of the nights with a free night certificate and get the points back. And I explained a couple of times that you're not going to get any points, even if you use the free night certificate. You're not going to get any points back. You're not. Because you'll pay the same number of points and just burn a free night certificate for nothing, because you can't match that up with points for a fifth night free.
No, I mean, this has come up with me with both Marriott and Hilton personally, where I've been looking at stays and hoping to use free night certificates and realizing they literally had zero value in the situations I was looking at. Zero value.
Zero, none. None in those cases. And so that obviously devalues it too. It's a great point to bring up. Another reason why I'd much rather have the 50,000 points. They're potentially much more valuable. So again, when the MS cost on those points is $125 to $150, then I don't know, that 50K cert has to be worth less. It's definitely makes those things questionable. In my case, it's still, I think, worth enough when combined with the other benefits of the Ritz card to keep the Ritz card, or certainly if it was the Brilliant card instead, to keep that card. But although I think the Ritz card has better ancillary value to it. So I guess that's debatable. It's an interesting debate to have. At any rate, I think that it definitely makes that more questionable. It's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
It does. And so for me, I'm definitely keeping my Ritz card, but the other cards are probably on the chopping block, to be honest. I don't need the headache of trying to find a good excuse to use them. That's where I'm at.
It's true. Yeah, it is a headache. It's difficult. And there are other options. I mentioned MSing Marriott points, and I've talked a lot about those select few of us that have the Capital One redemption that I do, where I'm able to redeem for Marriott gift cards. And those are certainly even more flexible, and I can use those when going through a portal to book properties. So I'm becoming less and less interested in the free night certificates. So I think maybe
Right.
you've convinced me to get rid of them.
Okay, good. Do we have any questions this week
We
from
do. We
readers?
do. We have a
Yeah.
really good question that I almost fired off a quick answer to. And then I thought about it some more and I was like, you know what? This is a really good question for this week. So the question of the week comes from Lisa. And Lisa commented on our reasonable redemption values post.
Mm,
So we have a reasonable redemptions value, or excuse me, reasonable redemption values resource page that lays out the value of all the various points. How much are United points worth or Hyatt points or this or that? And so we keep those to have as a frame of reference so you can look at it and see, okay, this is what you can reasonably expect to get out of American Airlines miles or what you can reasonably expect to get when you redeem Radisson points without too much effort. We try to keep those values really conservative to be a value of what you can expect to get without working too hard at finding the absolute perfect redemption. So
right.
Lisa
Right.
asks about that.
Mhm.
Would it be possible to regularly update RRVs, particularly in regard to recent devaluations from United, Hyatt, Marriott, etc.? Would it be possible to regularly update those because of those types of devaluations?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we need to do we need to update them? Have
I,
recent devaluations significantly changed the value of
yeah.
points?
Well, I think the thing is because we haven't updated them, we don't really know. I think that yes, in an ideal world, we would actually keep them updated all the time. The way we've done it in the past, the airline ones were based on logic more than observation. So we looked at average airline round trip cost for economy awards within the U.S. and said, well, most people redeem their miles in that way. So let's sort of estimate. Most airlines charge 25,000 miles round trip, and so how much are you saving by using your miles instead of your cash? And that's where that was the logic behind a lot of our airline RRVs. Okay, and so at the very least, we should be looking at, has the average cost of airfare changed since we last looked at it? Because if it's gone down, then the value of the miles has gone down. If it's gone up, obviously, it's gone up a little bit. So
Theoretically.
yeah, but the other thing is, are airlines doing this 25,000 mile round trip thingy anymore? And we know that there are plenty of cases where they're charging less than 25,000 miles, but sometimes they charge more. So that, with United and Delta in particular,
And also with American
and
now.
American with their
Web
web
specials.
specials, I think we'd be better off with a data driven approach to the RRVs, where we basically scrape a lot of data and put it into a database and say, all right, ideally we'd have some kind of scraper that would run regularly and use different multiple dates for travel to mix things up. Look at both holiday travel and non-holiday travel, business travel, weekend travel, and everything, and just look at the award prices, look at the paid prices, and calculate, right? So that would be ideal. Yes, I want to do that. We don't have any plans to do that. So
I
that's
thought it
where
was a
we're at
really
right now.
interesting point, though, because my first reaction was,
Yeah.
recent devalue. We updated these last May, and recent
Yeah.
devaluations don't significantly impact the small devaluations when things change category or that sort of thing. Don't really impact the value that much overall. But then I thought about it specifically with regard to United, and I was like, well, but actually the recent devaluations do pretty significantly change it
Mm.
because that 25,000 mile round trip is really just almost not a thing anymore. I mean, of course you
Right.
can find
Right.
some that are that way, but in all three of the major airlines in the United States, I think that I might venture to guess that most of the time it's not going to be 25,000 round trip anymore. So
Right.
it's really hard to
Right.
know how much those are worth compared to, economy class airfares. So I think that was an interesting point. That my first reaction was, we don't need to update it. And then I thought, well, maybe we do. And then I thought about, obviously, Hyatt and Marriott. I don't know. What do you think? Do we need to update those too?
Yeah.
Now that we have
Yeah.
peak and off peak pricing.
We do. We do. And this is directly related to what I was talking about before about wanting to change out the methodology I used for how I collected the data, because the data I collected I mean, so far was only for categories 5, 6, and 7, but I could use the same process to collect data across all categories, and then I have in my spreadsheet what we need to know. I have the point price and I have the cash price, and so we
Hmm.
can just say, okay, it's
This is
worth
what they're
X,
worth.
and that's what it's worth, and that would be great. So that I actually think that's very doable. Certainly with Marriott, I don't think, but tell me if I'm wrong. If you remember off the top of your head, I don't think Hyatt shows user reviews in the search results the way Marriott does,
I'm
and
honestly not sure.
and if I'm going to have in the criteria for Marriott only looking at the better reviewed ones, then I'd want to compare apples to apples and do the same for Hyatt. And so I'd have to think about that.
Maybe they do.
Maybe,
I'm not sure.
or
I honestly don't
or
usually. I
or,
assume that a Hyatt's going to be
yeah,
nice.
or
I
maybe
don't
I
usually
or
worry
maybe
about
we
it.
just say we just include all the results.
Yeah.
Instead of just picking the top three, just pick
Well,
everything,
yeah.
and
I mean, I
then
guess you kind of have to, right, in order to determine what the value. It's a tall endeavor. It's difficult because especially with 2,000 properties and change, there's a lot of
well,
data to
yeah,
collect
and
there.
and
Obviously, you're not going
I
to do
mean,
all of them, but
well, we could hire someone to web scrape it. I know that Drew from Travel is Free has done things like that, where he uses that Amazon Turk or whatever it is, a system like that to get people to bid on jobs, and so he wasn't even paying that much to get them to scrape. He would put all the parameters out there, what
mhm.
city pairs to look at, what dates of travel, things like that. So we could do the same thing and get someone to scrape the data, put it all in a database or spreadsheet, and and then we can update it. And so that's something we should do. Um, I want to do. Question is, when will we do it? I think is
Yeah.
I'd love to do it. I'd love to get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking in my mind, we do kind of regularly keep those up to date because we had updated them in November of 2017, I think, and then we
Mm,
looked at it again last year, and so it's just over a year and a half. And generally, I don't think points change value that significantly in less time than about a year and a
right.
half,
Right.
probably. So I would generally not think that we need to update necessarily already less than a year since our last update. But then I got thinking about it and I was like, well, that's a good question because I really do think there have been some more significant changes in the landscape. And
Well,
so keeping
yeah.
up on
Plus,
that.
the Marriott point values are still based on the observed point values from a web application that no longer exists from before the merger.
Yeah,
So
it's time to
it's
update that.
definitely time. I mean, that one is probably the most urgent, I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, it'd be great to update them all.
So Lisa, thank you for your question because it was a great question and probably a
Yeah.
good motivator for us to put that in the crosshairs, even though Greg was already kind of on his way towards that solution, it
And
seems.
if Lisa has programming skills and wants to scrape the data for us, we would be delighted to take that data and update those RRVs. Actually, maybe whether it's Lisa or someone else, if someone reaches out and says, "Hey, that sounds like a fun thing to do," let us know. We'll,
Right.
we'll
Right.
work with you and get it done, and we'll put your name if you want it on the page as someone who helped us get that done.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So all right, that's something to look out for our updated reasonable redemption values coming at some point in the future. We're always kind of working to increase the value of our resource pages to
Absolutely.
enhance them and make them more useful for readers. So that's the type of feedback and question. It's always great to get that so that we can take a look and say, okay, how can we make this better for readers and more useful?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. All right. Time for the goodbye
Well,
song.
it is time for the goodbye song, I think. So, our newly abbreviated goodbye song, if you've missed it, is if you'd like to find out more about what we've been talking about today, go to thefrequentmiler.com/subscribe. Again, that's thefrequentmiler, frequentmiler.com/subscribe. And that'll give you all the different ways to find us on Facebook, Twitter, podcast form, and so on and so forth.
Great. All right. We're going to say goodbye now.
Thank you very much. Always great having you here, Greg. Have a good week. Redeem some points well, and make sure you don't overpay those cancellation fees. All right, no more future confessions.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
See you next time.